Society members. Really appreciate the guys on the Harrison Society board for working with us to kind of build this out. So we did one of these Lunch with Local Leaders series last year with Max Yoder over at Leslie, the CEO and founder. And I thought that was a really good series that we could build into YPCI, provide exclusive access to some of the people around Indianapolis that are really movers and shakers or can bring knowledge to our base. So I think today we have one of those people here with Maggie. She's going to tell us about a great story and how she came to become an entrepreneur and really, thrive with this idea, this unique idea. So I'm going to let her and Rob of the Harrison Society are going to have a fireside type chat, go back and forth, and then we'll open up to questions for anything you guys want to ask her personally. But again, appreciate you coming out on a Jury Friday. Thank you.
Is it on? It's live. All right, so thanks for coming out, Maggie. Just to frame it up, do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are, your ties to Indiana, what you're doing now?
Sure. Is it really helpful to have the microphone? Yes. Okay, then I'll use it. Maggie Daniels. I grew up in Indiana, so actually grew up on the northeast side of Indianapolis. Went to school at Indiana University, so my whole family's been here, and what was the message?
So, after you graduated from college, what did you end up doing?
Okay, so my background's in finance and accounting. That's what I studied at IU. And after undergrad, I moved to Manhattan, where I was working for Lehman Brothers at the time, which, as you probably know, based on like the rough average age, I hit the market at the worst time for that. So I stayed on with Lehman Brothers through bankruptcy. And then when Barclays acquired us out of bankruptcy, I also stayed on there for another 6 years. So I was in the investment banking division of the entire investment bank. I covered financial institutions, primarily depositories and insurance companies. Around 2014, I kind of just was trying to figure out my next move, and in that industry, it's really challenging to be super impactful. I was blessed with the opportunity to be able to touch a lot of different companies, work on some pretty fascinating projects, mergers and acquisitions and IPOs, and I learned a ton in a relatively short period of time. But I got to the point where I was kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do long term, and for family reasons, but also professional reasons, that kind of led me back to wanting to come back to Indiana, and ended up making that move in the middle of 2014.
Great. So you mentioned family and some other priorities. So how'd that move bring in Try It Tiny? So was that part of the motivation, or?
So no, Try It Tiny, which is the name of the company that I founded, was not even remotely on my radar at that point. Like I said, I wanted to come back to kind of take what I thought was like taking my career to the next level. So in investment banking, you cover hundreds of companies and you only get so involved in each one. There's only so much granularity that you can really dive into with each particular client. When I moved back home was a lot for family reasons, but also career. So I actually started working at Kite Realty, which is a public real estate company based in Indianapolis. And I I was leading their investor relations and strategy departments. And so, for anyone that's not super familiar, basically in investor relations for a public company, you're effectively interfacing with Wall Street from the client side. Now I was the client with several banks covering me. The benefit of that role was I was diving into every single, it's not just how many properties you have, how do you model the NOI and trying to figure out valuation from that perspective. It's actually modeling it down to the individual leasing spaces, if that kind of gives some example or context to the different type of work that I was able to do there. And it was really how that transition goes to Try It Tiny was.
Do you mind telling us about Try It Tiny, what it is?
Sure. So Try It Tiny is an online platform for both tiny house and private land rentals. So initially, the business started out, we have two core competencies, and it started initially in one of them, which was an online platform, effectively an Airbnb-esque model, where if you owned a little bit of land that you weren't using, front yard, backyard, or driveway, or if you happen to already have a tiny house, you can list it for rent and make some extra money. And similarly, if you had a tiny house or an RV or camper, and you basically were looking for an alternative to a traditional campground, you could rent land from someone else, have a different type of experience, maybe be a little bit more remote. For tiny house enthusiasts, you could try it before you buy it kind of concept. And a lot of folks that go tiny, usually folks make that decision to go tiny for one of two main reasons. The first is financial flexibility. It's a lot more affordable than taking on a full-on mortgage, but you're also not just paying rent, you're owning something. And then geographic mobility. So the fact that most tiny homes are built on wheels affords them the flexibility that they could live, the winters in Aspen or Florida, and then migrate for another season if they wanted to. So when they get to the point where they can shed all of their belongings such that they can fit into one of these tiny homes, the next biggest question is, where do I park it? And buying land runs counter to the two primary reasons that folks go tiny. So having that rental platform was really the first step. The second core competency of the business that I alluded to earlier is that the company actually owns inventory. We own tiny homes, and we bring them to different events around the country where lodging is either unavailable or limited. So Indianapolis Motor Speedway, we bring in our fleet for that. If you think about like music festivals or hunting excursions, all kinds of different stuff.
So how did you come up with this idea? What was your inspiration, and what pushed you over the edge to move forward with it?
Well, naturally, finance and accounting on Wall Street is an easy segue to tiny homes. So. Just kidding.
Well, I'm sure the Kite Realty background.
Yeah, I think all of the past history helped. But I was traveling a lot at Kite for the job. I was renting my house out on Airbnb like so many people do just to make some extra cash. When traveling started to slow, I have like a mini hobby farm or like homestead where I live, and I was looking to kind of expand that. And as I was trying to grow that, it became really inconvenient when I wasn't in town to keep leaving my foundation home when it was rented. So I bought the first tiny house just as a place for me to stay when my foundation home was rented. And I thought they were interesting. I wanted to give that a try. I'd seen it on TV and read about it. And the first day I had it there, someone was coming to rent my foundation home, and they saw the tiny house, and they asked to stay there instead. And I don't have a sprawling home, but it certainly accommodates more than this little tiny house did. And so I initially thought that was just weird. Didn't really think much of it. And then the next guest, the exact same thing happened. A few weeks later, I got someone dropped by the house. They had seen the tiny house driving by and asked if they could put their tiny house on my property for land and pay for land rentals. So it kind of just spiraled from that. Really, I was trying to do a solve for my problem or my inconvenience at the time. And then it took a direction that I really wasn't anticipating.
So, what pushed you over the edge to do this full time?
Well, I would say over the course of 2016, I had done a ton of research, both because I was building my own tiny house and because I was just interested in what was going on. I was talking with one of my really close mentors, who I've known for a very long time, and was kind of bouncing, sharing stories like I just did about how, can you believe that they wanted to stay in a tiny house instead of my other house? And, I could really make some extra cash. I have all this land that I'm not using, and so we started batting around the ideas for, it took about a year. I wouldn't say that I'm a huge risk taker at all, actually. But ultimately, it got to the point where I was doing a great job at work. That was going really well, and I finally had to take a step back and think that I could try this, and it could work, and that could be great. Or downside risk, I could try this, it could not work out, and having a failed startup is probably not the worst thing you could have on your resume. Then I can come right back and do what I'm doing now. So that ultimately, right or wrong, was enough to give me the comfort to give it a try.
So, startup tiny house. What were some of those initial challenges that you had? Were they anticipated? How did you overcome them?
Yeah, well, how much time do you have? There's so many challenges. Initially, there's no blueprint for, if any of you have your own business, there's no blueprint for what you're supposed to do, when you're supposed to do it, how much of your budget's supposed to be allocated to what certain, activities or sections of the income statement. And for personality types like mine, that's really difficult. I like to know exactly what the right move is and how to execute that. And what's also difficult, and I found very challenging at the beginning, again, just for me personally, was that I'm a sole founder, and for some people, I think that works really, really well. For me, especially in the beginning, you don't have employees, you don't have anybody. It became like an echo chamber almost, and because you literally talk out loud to yourself about trying to walk through a decision, or is this the right way to message this thing online, or this marketing piece, or and I think that it can be a little difficult after several months of that to not have to, if I had a co-founder, or if you had a small team in place, somebody to bounce ideas off of, or step in and say, that's a horrible idea, man. Something like that I think became very difficult in the beginning.
So, have you had to pivot from the original business plan? Were there some challenges that you had experienced and you just thought, hey, I can't overcome this, let's change the approach?
Yeah, I think if people were ever considered starting a business, or if you have, you probably agree with this, that pivots are pretty normal. And while it's important that you stay rooted in whatever it is that you're passionate about, what you really want to accomplish, the way that you get there could be could be not as linear as you initially thought, or maybe just take a different route to get there. So initially it was just the online platform, and the revenue just came from, you know, the commission of brokering transactions together. So when I launched the business, the website went live in the middle of March of 17. And what happened was I decided I was going to cobble together a couple of tiny homes. I only had one, that was mine. And I went door to door right around the Speedway, 8500. And I found a couple of neighborhoods that had decent backyards. And I literally knocked on the doors. And of course, you can probably imagine I'm asking them if I can put tiny homes. No, I don't own them all. In your backyard for the biggest weekend of the year. So I got lots of no's. Yeah, lots. And then I hand wrote a letter to everyone that at least talked to me and mailed them out. And one of them actually got back to me. And it's a really lovely couple. And so we put 3 units there. We marketed those, and I actually pitched it as a boutique pop-up hotel. One unit didn't even have a bathroom, so it was a sleeping quarters. And that actually got a little bit of local press. And so that was kind of a nice, interesting trial. But what it really did was Bristol Motor Speedway in Eastern Tennessee somehow picked up that local news article. And they called me and asked if I would come do their big NASCAR race out in Eastern Tennessee. And it was that event that created the first major pivot, which is now our second competency of the business, in that I sourced some units from Eastern Tennessee, which I don't know if anyone's been to Eastern Tennessee. There's nothing. Ever. So ultimately, I made the decision to purchase units. So the business owns 20 tiny homes now. And oddly enough, when we made the announcement in Bristol about that race, a week maybe, and then I get the call from Indianapolis 500, the IMS. So that now we're inside the track there, and we've since done Road America in Wisconsin and Gateway in St. Louis. We did a miniature version of it in Daytona, and a few other tracks as well. So that certainly was a huge pivot. It was one I wasn't sure I wanted to take. It's a huge decision to kind of take that level of asset and put that on the books. But I think, again, it actually has been one of the biggest, it's a very complementary business line in terms of everything gets booked through the site. It actually added good quality inventory to the site, which takes a while to kind of curate that. I think it's something that other entrepreneurs would agree that it's important to be able to embrace it. So we'll probably continue to pivot, I would imagine. Again, and as long as you're not spinning in circles or going off track from what your core mission is, I think pivoting is a great thing.
So you mentioned you had 20 tiny homes.
Yeah.
You've been at Bristol, Daytona. How do you get them from point A to point B? Do you have a whole team, or are you just daisy chaining all of them?
Yeah, the ultimate slinky. No. They're all just pulled behind trailers, so just like a standard RV or camper that you would take. I haul a lot of the local runs, and we contract out a lot of the longer distance ones, but there's no secret sauce there, so it's just literally one by one. I do have a few folks on staff full time now, and then a decent number of folks that, again, are more on a contract based on, like a maintenance, something that's not necessarily as steady or regular.
So I'm glad you brought up maintenance. So do you have like a cleaning crew? Do you notice a lot of wear and tear from being on the roads? How does that sort of look from a maintenance perspective?
So for cleaning, everyone in a startup, everyone does everything. So I've cleaned 3 today. So everyone cleans. When they're not local, we'll just find a local cleaning service. It's actually pretty standard, I think, with all the different rentals and people traveling a lot more. There's plenty, and it's an easy thing to do to just pass through that fee. And for maintenance, maintenance is probably one of the things I underestimated the most. Again, you're hauling these things, through the mountains or just long distances. You're going to have wear and tear. That's certainly more. That is a much bigger expense line than someone banging up a house. Typically, even when we're at really big events, the price point that's demanded based on the costs, usually prices out a certain level of riffraff.
So, talking about the business, I want to bring it towards the more personal and professional front. You had to make some sacrifices, leaving a job with a steady income. What kept you motivated and kept you focused and pushed you to continue on?
Anyone starting a business, or if you have, you know that it comes with a lot of personal, financial, emotional sacrifices. When the first year in 2017, I made the commitment to visit in person the first 100 hosts that signed up for Try It Tiny by the end of the first year. So I took a 10 to 12,000 mile road trip in tow. I traveled across 14 different states extensively, and I was gone for about a little over 2 months. And so obviously that can be difficult, when you're in the middle of nowhere, Arkansas. You've been there for a little while, but the hosts were so gracious, and when I would have those moments of being a little homesick or just missing a familiar face, you have to kind of try to take a step back and embrace those challenges and sacrifices, because I've met some of the most incredible people that I'll ever meet, and I never would have met them in either of the prior roles that I had in my career. And you can't take it super lightly. The financial stress that it puts on you, if you're accustomed to having a paycheck, and I'm really pushing for one in 2020. So, but yeah, you have to be very calculated with that. I can't do a lot of the things that maybe I could have done before, personally from a financial standpoint, but I also feel like I am able to do a lot more that I could have never done before. Again, just being able to kind of be the real steward of your life like that. And again, I think when things get tough, you kind of just have to go back to why you started it. And you knew that was going to be a difficult thing, and just trying to stay true to what really got you there in the first place. And lastly, because I just think it's so important, I mentioned I had a mentor that I kind of talked through when I was contemplating this. And I know people say this all the time, but if you can keep like 2, maybe 3, it doesn't have to be a lot of people, but just 2 or 3 folks really close, and that you trust, that you want to emulate some aspect of them that can kind of help guide you. That has just been the most instrumental thing for me. And I think, again, I know people say it a lot, but oftentimes it's easy to push off that networking or reaching out to that, maybe it's someone senior to you somewhere, or it's easy to push those things off because they're not required. But if you could actually make that commitment, it's just, for me, it's been a game changer and a lifesaver.
Well, before we wrap it up, I was going to let you make any big announcements that we may have seen in the news recently. You want to talk about?
I don't have any big announcements.
Well, Purdue and
we do
Colts.
have. We don't have a deal with the Colts.
Well,
we opened up, I guess, the first Metro tiny house hotel, which I can say with a little bit more ease now. It's across from Lucas Oil. We have 5 units available there. We have room service. We have concierge packages, experience packages you can do. And if you have any interest in tiny homes at all, if you keep an eye on that, we're going to actually be rolling out some pretty awesome things at that location. And we just announced that we finished a deal with Purdue University to do for their whole football season. We'll have kind of like a VIP tailgating, so you can stay across the street from the stadium. They're going to again have some VIP offerings and golf carts to take people, although it's very close distance. So that was pretty exciting. We had pushed for that deal for 2 years now. So that's been a big win as well. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions or anything.
What's next for you guys? What are you looking to do to grow, expand? Are you going to take it internationally? What kind of growth is that?
Yeah, thank you. So I think we have listings in about 44 states right now, but what we've done in Indiana has been so specific, on Court Advantage in terms of, doing a downtown hotel, a university, where we provide lodging at the state fair, music festivals, all kinds of things like that, what I'd like to do is really penetrate like the next market. Because what we've done here can be very replicable. And then if you think about some of the other big cities across the country, I think we're currently trying to just hone in on what that next big move is, because a mistake I made, I think, in the very beginning was trying to be everywhere right away. And I think I poorly spent some resources doing that. Is it that great to be in all of those states? I don't know. But we ended up kind of refocusing and really working Indiana, and Indiana works. It really, really does for us. So now we just want to kind of find that next state to do basically the exact same thing. So I'm sure that doesn't sound like a grand plan, but to do that takes a lot of infrastructure, resources, corporate structure changes. So that's kind of what we're looking for next.
Can you guys hear me?
yeah.
I have one question about the business. So you mentioned Airbnb was kind of, similar model to charters, how do you think about pulling a boat and kind of competing, arguing with them, strategically, reach what Airbnb
I won't flatter myself to suggest that I compete with Airbnb. But, yeah, I think, I think there are two schools of thought on it, if I understood your question, correct me if I'm wrong. But you could see, a person in my position could see an Airbnb or VRBO or HomeAway, whatever it is, as a threat. Or you can see it as an opportunity. And for me, I like seeing what they're doing. I'm still a host on Airbnb because I like to know what's going on and the new changes you know, we sometimes adapt and add those changes as well. It's also good for our customers because if they have a tiny house for rent, you know, they're familiar with that platform most likely. So we want it to be easy as well. The important thing to do when you do that is, okay, so why are you different? Why are you here? Why are you stay here? And we are exclusively dedicated really to spreading awareness about the tiny house movement. So that's all we'll do. That's who we are. And that's where my passion came from. So I mean, I think it's making sure you have that distinguishing characteristic or clear delineation against the competitor, or the other business. So I actually kind of just view it as something to look through and gain information from.
Yeah, that was exactly my question.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I was really interested in using that opportunity instead of
Okay, good.
Talked about your strategies for adding land inventory when, not that you're competing against Airbnb, but I'm imagining the type of demographic of somebody who has a house can vary widely for if they want to rent their house. They have a large amount of land that they want to lease out. I don't know if those people are already going to be on Airbnb because they just have land, maybe their house isn't that nice, and they want to do it. Are you going door to door still? What are some of your strategies to adding that land inventory?
It's actually really insightful. So the question was, you know, somebody that has a tiny house that's maybe on Airbnb, you know, you can kind of see how you might target them, but what about the land hosts? Seems like it could be a disconnect, and you're exactly right. So an ideal land host is someone with enough space that's, you know, 30 miles or less to the place with the largest employment. You know, so it's, you know, it's a donut region here in Indiana. And a lot of times, you know, folks want a little bit more remote place. So how do you reach the farmer who's probably not on it, doesn't know what Airbnb is potentially? Maybe they don't get on the internet every single day. You know, we've tried mailers before. They actually have a higher hit ratio than you think. Again, we're trying to reach the specific type of less tech savvy, or maybe they are savvy, they just aren't on it. It's not in their daily life to be doing it or needing it. And you know, there are some other really good businesses out there that kind of helped us. So there's a company called Woofing. If anyone knows, it's WOOF, Woofing. And they, actually I think I said that because WWO, it's in the report. Anyway, they have, basically it's like a job share situation. So if you were traveling and you were going to go to Texas and you were on a budget, you didn't have a place to stay, you would work on their farm for 8 hours in exchange for food and a place to stay. So we actually partnered up with them for a little while, as well as another company called Harvest Hosts, which is like wineries or fruit farms, things like that, where in that instance, again, if you want a place to stay, you just agree to buy one of their products, you know, whether it's a bottle of wine or something like that, and they'll put you up. And a lot of the people that do that are in campers, or they're going to pitch a tent. So they aren't always, in a foundation style lodging situation. And both of those organizations were really helpful. So now you've identified people that have property, that are open to and willing to accepting a stranger onto the property and letting them stay overnight in exchange for something. Those two were really helpful. And then again, I think after that, you just hope that you can have those hosts have the best experience possible, that they go tell somebody else. And those are the types of customer acquisitions that are the stickiest, that stay with us the longest.
Any other questions?
Have you run into any challenges, particularly in Indiana, with tiny homes and the extreme weather we see here?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Don't have to. Actually caught a tiny house on fire this winter. So, yes, I have. Yeah, it can be challenging. So full disclosure, they operate fine until we experience, 2, 3+ days of single-digit or really low teen weather. So this winter was pretty brutal. We take a few basic approaches to handling even just the 20s, that kind of temperature. What we do, we do bales of straw to put underneath the trailer to protect it from wind and partially insulate it. You can do heating pads. They're an RV type of product that it basically looks like a big blanket. It's like a heating blanket effectively that actually has its own internal thermometer, so it kicks on when it gets to be below 40 degrees usually. You can heat tape a lot of your piping and blast the heat inside and run antifreeze through the lines as frequently as possible. But what I've learned, which I cannot fix yet, is I would have constructed them a little differently, in hindsight. So knowing that I wanted a certain subset to continue to function year-round, I would have been much more cognizant of the location of the water lines. Some of them, some of them are on the inside of the insulation, some of them are on the outside of the insulation. If they're on an exterior wall, I would have relocated that in several units, because even as much as I can do, those lines are going to freeze after a certain point. So it can be done. It is a huge challenge, though.
Go ahead.
Kind of building on that question, you said that maintenance has been one of your biggest challenges, especially with having extreme weather conditions or just upkeep. Do you have a strategy in mind of how to kind of streamline that in the future? I know it's difficult because things come up and you just have to fix it, but it's just like any maintenance. But is there a general plan that you have for future projects that you build on that would require less maintenance?
Yeah. So no matter what I do, there will always be maintenance for sure. But in terms of my original kind of checklist of amenities and features of the homes, was much more focused on the rental, which is really the easy part. People want outlets by the beds. People want a nice, comfortable mattress. People want 2 sleeping areas. People want a great space to get ready. That was the easy part. That was pretty much the extent of, that was probably 80% of my checklist when I was designing the units. My list now is probably 4 times as long. So I want to make sure, a little bit of is trial by fire too. I like a Bosch tank water heater. I don't like a tankless. That's stuff that you learn. I don't like the tankless because they tend to get bumped around in transit and they very quickly break. I like a SureFlow water pump because its warranty is 3 times as long as the flow jet. And so little things like that you can figure out over time. So I think initially, long term, I would construct the units in a much more durable, in a way where the jostling of transportation, at least, is less of an issue or a catalyst to cause maintenance. I would not be so frugal there's a time and place to make sure you're buying the quality parts. So as those break, we replace them with quality parts, my maintenance goes down on that, per unit. And I think, again, there's being mindful of quality over cost. Sometimes having an experienced transporter. This is not like towing a boat. In fact, it's like towing an airplane vertically behind you. I mean, they're 13 and a half feet tall, so it takes a different level of care. Someone who's going to go inside and make sure everything really was tow ready. Is everything strapped down? Are things not off? Are things off the walls? Is the barn door off the sliding track? Stuff like that. So paying a little bit more per loaded mile for that tow driver to make that one 30-second look and double check has actually saved me money. So a lot of it, I think, is just inexperience before and trying to learn through some of the mishaps. And some of it will be construction changes.
So I really think you have a really great idea. There's two secular trends I think you're building on. It's people looking for unique experiences and also minimalist living, especially in cities like New York, California, which maybe those fit better with your idea. But my thing is, where do you ever see it being not mobile in the sense that you would actually just set up communities where you put those adders that you want to stay where you kind of are?
So I don't know if I'm going to necessarily be in the business of owning communities per se, but in terms of, again, kind of going back to our core mission, which is really just to spread awareness about the tiny house movement. Whether or not they're on wheels is less important to me. I also happen to think that you can live tiny regardless of the size of your house. So I'm not one that's hung up on square footage either. Living tiny is really just about living a life that is without excess. And so I think there's a lot to be said. A lot of the things we've talked about, whether it's winterizing, maintenance, becomes a lot easier if you don't move them. If they're not on wheels, if they have a foundation and you can dig the water lines underground, a lot of that becomes easier too. I just think that the mobility factor helps us spread the word faster. We would not be able to expose the movement to some of our clients that come, we aren't getting tiny house enthusiasts at the Indy 500. We're getting Indy 500 fans. Some of them probably didn't even know what they signed up for when they said that they had a tiny house there. So yeah, I could definitely see that being as an add-on product for sure. We're looking at a few opportunities that would mimic what you're describing. And I think that it would still be complementary of the mission.
One last one.
How do you manage the new software and stuff as a founder? What's your role in new technology? What's your role with new technology, new websites and stuff? How do you manage that as a founder? Are you a technical CEO? I'm just curious how you manage the updates and the site and stuff, and balancing that with everything.
Okay, I think I understand. So I've done a few different things. I've had a developer be brought in-house to be running point on product development and execution and UX. And then I've also worked with a couple of different firms. And it's been varying in terms of when it's most appropriate for one versus the other. But I think as it is with any department in the company, having a dedicated and educated point person for that is what's most helpful. So we don't change anything on the website that I don't know about, ever. We're just too small. But it's the website's a big reflection of the brand, so it's really important too. But I don't personally write any code. I don't do any of that personally. So I would say I'm involved in the strategy and the implementation, the communication around it, but I'm not actually the one doing the changes, if that makes sense. Does that answer the question?
Kind of, I was just curious, like kind of more tech businesses, like they always say, like, you used to have a technical program or you need to code yourself, and it seems like you're not doing that pretty well, so I'm just curious, like, how about you have to do that, switching between the consulting and access.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a ton of merit to folks saying that you should have a technical background in terms of code development to do something like what I'm doing. I think the bulk of our business, while it is stemmed and supported by the online platform, we really are kind of a hospitality business at this, as well. And again, making sure you have access, readily available access to that kind of talent is good. However, that's not to say that if I did have that background, maybe the website would be a lot better, I don't know, or a lot worse, I have no idea. But I could definitely see that argument for sure.
Great, well, thanks Maggie, and we'll break from here. Have a good rest of your day.